So it's early 1961.
Yeah.
You are standing in this completely sterile room at the UCLA Medical Center, and lying in the hospital bed right in front of you is a man in a deep, utterly unresponsive coma.
It's a really grim scene.
Yeah, incredibly grim. He's been the victim of this brutal head-on car collision on Sunset Boulevard. His pelvis is fractured, his legs are shattered, and his brain is just entirely shut down.
Right, the trauma is massive.
Exactly. So the doctors have been trying everything, right? They speak to him, they call out his real name. Nothing. Just total silence.
Which is terrifying for the family.
Completely. So finally, one of the neurologists decides to try a tactic that just sounds, well, completely absurd.
Yeah, grasping at straws.
Right. The doctor leans in really close to the man's ear and asks, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?"
It sounds like absolute desperation, a doctor just trying anything when conventional medicine has completely failed.
But then something impossible actually happens. After a slight pause, the man in the coma replies in this weak but very distinct voice. He says, just fine, Doc. How are you?"
It's wild. It remains one of the most remarkable medical and psychological anecdotes of the 20th century, honestly.
Yeah.
It's this singular moment where fiction somehow bypassed a shattered reality.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today, we are exploring the life of the man in that hospital bed, Mel Blanc.
The absolute legend.
You definitely know his voice. Well, actually, you know about 1,000 of his voices.
At least 1,000, yeah, right.
We're diving into the curated sources and the biography of the man who is widely considered the greatest voice actor of all time.
Without a doubt.
But, we're not here to just list off a bunch of cartoon trivia today.
No, the story is way deeper than that.
It really is. This is a story-driven biography of a man who legitimized an entire invisible industry. He turned his vocal cords into, literal athletic instruments.
Yeah, Olympia level.
Exactly. And he poured so much of his own consciousness into his creations that they literally pulled him back from the edge of death.
Which is just, the psychology of that hospital moment is really where the story truly begins.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to understand how a man's identity became so deeply intertwined with his voices to the point that they functioned when his own brain, when we have to look at the moment he decided to erase his original identity entirely.
Right. Let's go back to his early life. So he was born in 1908 in San Francisco, but he grew up in Portland, Oregon.
Right.
And his birth name wasn't actually Blank spelled with a C. It was Melvin Jerome Blank, B-L-A-N-K.
Which, is a really heavy surname for a child with any kind of ambition.
Oh, for sure.
It implies an absence, right?
Yeah.
A void.
And the adults in his life actually used it against him. There's a story that when he was just 16 years old, a teacher cruelly told him that he was going to amount to nothing in life.
Just devastating.
Yeah, she literally told him he would be just like his last name, a Blank.
The psychological impact of an authority figure telling a teenager they are destined to be a literal nobody, that's profound.
Well, it would crush most kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his reaction is what sets the trajectory for his entire life. He didn't internalize it.
Yeah, he did the opposite.
Right. He legally changed the spelling of his last name.
Yeah.
He dropped the K and added a C. He became Mel, B-L-A-N-C.
It's such a power move.
It really is.
Yeah.
It was a conscious rejection of the idea that he was a void. She decided right then he was going to fill that name with something extraordinary.
And he already had this incredible toolkit to make that happen, too. The sources note he had this early fondness for dialects, like he'd been practicing voices since he was just 10 years old.
Which takes a lot of dedication.
Yeah, but he was also a recognized musical prodigy. By the time he was 19, he was the youngest orchestra conductor in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, he was performing in vaudeville shows all around the Pacific Northwest. But, how does being a musical prodigy translate to doing funny voices?
Well, it's actually the absolute core of his genius.
Really?
Yeah. Voice acting at its highest level, it's not just about making a funny sound. It's about music.
Oh, I see.
It's pacing, it's rhythm, pitch. It's knowing the exact microsecond to drop a beat for maximum comedic effect.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. When you conduct an orchestra, you're managing the timing and the volume of dozens of instruments to create this unified emotional response. Blank took that symphonic understanding of timing and just applied it directly to his own vocal cords.
So he takes all that musical talent into the early days of radio. He starts in Portland radio around 1927. He even produced a show called Cobweb and Nuts with his wife Estelle.
Right, before they eventually made the move down to Los Angeles.
Right. But his true breakout happens on the Jack Benny program on the NBC Red Network. Can you explain the environment of live radio back then? Because the story of how he got his biggest role on that show sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it was. Live radio in the 1930s was a total high-wire act. Millions of people are listening simultaneously.
No pressure.
Exactly. And if something goes wrong, you have dead air, which is the ultimate cardinal sin of broadcasting.
You just can't have silence.
Never. So Jack Benny was this titan of radio, and his character drove this famously old, decrepit Maxwell automobile. It was always sputtering and backfiring for laughs.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right, so during one live national broadcast, the sound department actually missed their cue. The recorded sound effect for the car's failing engine just didn't play.
So there's just total silence on, like, national television's equivalent of the Super Bowl.
Complete panic-inducing silence. But Blank, who was just standing by doing these minor bit parts on the show, he steps right up to the microphone.
Oh, wow.
And he improvised the car sounds himself, using only his mouth and throat. The sputtering, the coughing, the wheezing engine noise, he did it flawlessly in perfect comedic timing.
That is incredible.
And the live audience completely lost it. The improvisation was so incredibly funny that Jack Benny decided right then and there to just throw out the record entirely.
No way.
Yeah. Mel Blanc became the permanent voice of the Maxwell automobile.
I mean, you think about that today, right? That's like a massive live stream today with millions watching. And the host's digital soundboard completely crashes.
Right.
And then some guest sitting on the couch just flawlessly beatboxes the exact air horns, transition effects, and music drops without missing a single beat.
Yeah.
Just completely saving the broadcast.
It's a perfect analogy. He became this human Foley artist. He was completely indispensable.
And he didn't just stop at the car, did he?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He went on to voice Benny's pet polar bear, Carmichael. He voiced Polly the parrot. He voiced a character named Cy, the little Mexican, who is famous for speaking only one single word at a time.
Wow, the range is insane.
By 1946, his musical timing and versatility had him appearing on over 15 different national radio programs.
But, you know, performing live on the radio is an entirely different beast from the grueling, isolated work of an animation booth.
Oh, completely different.
And that's where his physical limits were truly tested. He transitions into the golden age of animation, joining Leon Schlesinger Productions in 1936 to work on Warner Bros. Theatrical shorts.
Right, and this is where he moves from being a really good utility player to the undisputed star.
Okay.
He gets his first major role taking over the voice of Porky Pig from the original actor, Joe Doherty. This is in a 1937 short called Porky's Duck Hunt.
Wait, Porky's Duck Hunt, isn't that also the debut of Daffy Duck?
It is, and Blank voices Daffy in that too.
Yeah.
Then, just a few years later, in 1940, in a short called A Wild Hare, he debuts the character that would basically define his life.
Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny.
I want to talk about the recording process for Bugs, actually, because there is a very persistent pop culture myth about it.
Ah, the carrots.
Yes, the carrots. Bugs is famous for his catchphrase, "Oh, what's up, Doc?" which is always preceded by the loud crunching of a carrot.
Yeah.
And to get that authentic sound, Blank would actually bite into a real raw carrot right in the recording booth. But this rumor circulated for decades that Mel Blanc was secretly allergic to carrots.
It's a fascinating myth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it really stems from the sheer industrial pace of his work at the time. People saw him spitting out carrots in the studio and just assumed he had some medical aversion to them.
But the sources completely debunk the allergy myth. He flatly denied it.
Yeah, he wasn't allergic.
He spit them out because it was just a mechanical necessity. He was churning out hundreds of cartoons. You cannot clearly deliver rapid-fire dialogue with a mouthful of chewed raw carrot.
Exactly.
And he simply didn't have the time to stand there and swallow it before the next line, so he would bite, crunch, spit it into a spittoon, and deliver the line. It was literally an assembly line of vocal performance.
And he was running multiple assembly lines simultaneously, too.
Oh, right.
While he was under contract with Warner Bros., he actually originated the voice in that iconic laugh for Woody Woodpecker over at Universal.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize he did Woody Woodpecker originally.
He did. He was even hired by Disney to voice Gideon the cat in Pinocchio.
Really?
Yeah, though the filmmakers later decided Gideon should actually be mute, so almost all his dialogue was deleted.
Ouch.
They just left 3 solitary hiccups in the final film. And he also voiced Private Snafu in a series of animated training shorts to educate recruited soldiers during World War II.
That is an unbelievable amount of output. And all of this brings up a really good question about the sheer biology of this man.
Yeah, the physical toll.
Because we usually think of voice acting as someone just, making silly noises into a microphone. But the sources reveal this is a brutal athletic feat.
It is intensely physical work. When a doctor actually examined Blank's throat, he discovered that Blank possessed unusually thick, powerful vocal cords. The doctor actually compared his biological setup and his exceptional range to that of the legendary opera singer Enrico Caruso.
Wait, how exactly do thick vocal cords help someone voice a cartoon duck? Like, what is the mechanical advantage there?
Well, think of it like the strings on a cello versus a violin.
Okay.
Thicker, more robust vocal cords can withstand a significantly higher velocity of airflow. They can handle intense muscular constriction without tearing or suffering severe fatigue.
So they're just more durable.
Much more durable. And they allow for a much wider frequency range and incredible resonance. Blank himself actually noted how this played out in the booth.
What did he say?
He said Sylvester the Cat was the easiest character to voice because it was basically just his normal speaking voice with a sloppy spray added to the articulation.
Oh, that makes sense.
But Yosemite Sam was agonizing.
Because Yosemite Sam is constantly screaming at the absolute top of his lungs.
Exactly. The sheer loudness, that forceful raspiness, all the gravel in the throat required to produce Sam's voice, it physically tore up his throat.
Wow.
Without that unusually thick, durable vocal anatomy, doing Yosemite Sam for hours on end would have permanently destroyed a normal person's voice in a matter of months.
That's wild. So you have a man with the biological equipment of an opera legend performing the most physically demanding character work imaginable.
Right.
And he's acting as the voice behind the most famous animated figures on the planet. Yet absolutely no one sitting in those movie theaters in the early 1940s had any idea who he was.
None. And this touches on a deeply exploitative era in the entertainment industry.
How so?
Well, during this period, voice actors were completely anonymous. The studio system treated them essentially as disposable gig workers.
Like they weren't real actors.
Exactly. They were just part of the sound department.
Huh?
Uncredited, largely unrecognized, and vastly underpaid compared to the on-screen talent.
And that dynamic leads to a massive confrontation in 1944. Mel Blanc goes right into the office of studio boss Leon Schlesinger.
A brave move.
Right. He points out that he is carrying the studio's biggest stars, Bugs, Daffy Porky, and he asks for a salary raise.
Schlesinger says no.
Schlesinger flatly denies him. He refuses to pay him a single dime more.
But Blank understood leverage.
He did.
He realized that if the studio wouldn't grant him financial equity, he needed to secure cultural equity. So he asked for a screen credit instead.
He demanded a contract stipulation that read, Voice Characterizations by Mel Blanc. And he got it.
It's huge.
He became the absolute first voice actor in history to receive an on-screen credit. It started with the Bugs Bunny shorts, expanded to Porky and Daffy, and by the end of 1946, his name was on every subsequent Warner Bros. Cartoon he touched.
And, the magnitude of this pivot really cannot be overstated.
It changed everything.
It did. By securing those few words on a title card, Mel Blanc essentially invented the modern profession of the voice actor.
Wow.
He transformed a faceless sound effects job into a billed, legally protected public identity.
Which gave him power.
Exactly. Once his name was on the screen, his voice became intellectual property. He fiercely protected the rights to his characterizations for the rest of his life. He repeatedly took civil action against anyone who used his voice without permission.
So he paved the way.
He built the legal and cultural foundation that every working voice actor relies on today.
He pulled an entire art form out of the shadows, and it paid off beautifully for him. By 1960, his exclusive contract with Warner Bros. Ends, which allows him to branch out into the exploding world of television animation with Hanna-Barbera.
Right, primetime cartoons.
He becomes Barney Rubble and Dino on the Flintstones. He's Mr. Spacely on the Jetsons, Secret Squirrel, Captain Caveman. I mean, he is at the absolute peak of his power and visibility.
He's everywhere.
And then comes January 24th, 1961.
The collision on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah. He was driving alone in his sports car when he suffered a horrific head-on collision at an infamous, incredibly dangerous intersection known locally as Dead Man's Curve.
Such a tragic moment.
The physical injuries were just devastating. His legs and pelvis were fractured. And as we discussed at the very beginning of our deep dive, he slipped into a profound coma.
It was a coma so deep that he was utterly unresponsive to his own name, to his family, to the doctors. The neural networks that responded to the identity of Mel Blanc were entirely dormant.
And this is the part that still gives me chills. The doctor leans in and asks, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?" And Blank answers in character.
It's unbelievable.
Then the doctor asks if Tweety is there too, and Blank, still in a coma, replies, I taught a putty tat."
Wow.
I just have to ask about the neuroscience here. How does a brain completely bypass a man's primary identity but successfully wake up and respond to the fictional characters he made up?
It's fascinating. The medical consensus points to a remarkable display of neuroplasticity, coupled with the sheer depth of his craft.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you learn a new skill, your brain builds a pathway of neurons. The more you use that skill, the stronger and faster that pathway becomes.
Right.
For decades, Mel Blanc hadn't just been doing impressions. He had been pouring intense physical, emotional, and musical energy into these specific characters on a daily basis.
He was carving massive superhighways into his brain.
Precisely. The trauma of the crash essentially blocked the local roads, the normal pathways connecting to his primary identity as Mel.
Oh, wow.
But the neural superhighways he had built for Bugs Bunny and Tweety Bird were so deeply entrenched, so robustly carved into his gray matter, that they functioned as alternate routes to consciousness.
That is mind-blowing.
The characters weren't just jobs anymore. They had become distinct, deeply embedded alternate personas within his neurological architecture. His creations quite literally provided the bridge to pull his consciousness out of the dark.
And his recovery was just as unbelievable as his awakening. He finally goes home in March, but he still has a job to do. The Flintstones is a massive primetime hit, and he is the voice of Barney Rubble.
And he was still in a full-body cast. He was completely unable to commute to a studio, so the studio came to him.
They literally set up a sprawling recording rig right in his hospital room and later in his home. Blanc recorded his lines for the Flintstones lying flat on his back, immobilized in plaster, while his co-stars gathered around his bed to run the scenes with him. The work ethic is staggering.
It really is. And what is equally staggering is the reverence his peers had for him during this vulnerable time.
Oh, right, with the Warner Bros.
Yeah, Warner Bros. Had other projects in production and desperately needed someone to fill in for Bugs and Porky while Blanc recovered. So they approached Stan Freberg,
Who was a legend himself.
an absolute legend in the world of voice acting and satire,
Yeah.
and Freberg flatly declined. Out of pure respect for the master, he just refused to touch the characters.
Blank's son, Noel, who was, learning the trade, did step in to help with a few minor loop lines to cover for his dad, but the industry largely paused and waited for Blank to heal.
They knew he was irreplaceable.
They did. Oh, and Blank was not about to let that near-fatal crash go unpunished either. He filed a $500,000 lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles over the incredibly dangerous design of that road.
Well, it had earned the name Dead Man's Curve because there had been 26 severe accidents at that exact spot in just the 2 years prior to Blank's collision.
That's insane. And his lawsuit actually forced the city to fund a complete restructuring and flattening of the curves at that location. So Bugs Bunny literally saved future lives by forcing a major American city to fix its infrastructure.
It is a remarkable legacy. But, the reality of that crash forced a pretty major shift in Blank's perspective.
Oh.
He survived, but he was sharply reminded of his own mortality. He began to think very seriously about the permanence of his art. He wanted to ensure his voices could outlive his human body.
And he was actually incredibly forward-thinking about this.
Yeah.
The sources mention that way back in 1958, a few years before the crash even happened, he began making multi-track studio recordings of his voices.
Right, because he was terrified of a future where his physical limits would prevent him from performing. So he started building an archive. He and his estate, along with Warner Bros., eventually formalized the Warner Blanc Audio Library. It consisted of 550 songs and isolated voices of his characters.
It's like he was building an analog AI training model decades before computers could even do it.
Exactly.
By isolating all these sounds, syllables, and pitches, his son Noel and the Blank Communications Corporation could take those archive recordings and physically rearrange the syllables to create custom, new dialogue for the characters.
It was incredibly innovative.
Yeah, that is why if you were playing a Looney Tunes video game or playing with a talking toy in the 1990s or early 2000s, you were still hearing Mel Blanc's exact, authentic voice long after he was gone.
He really transitioned into the elder statesman of animation in his later years. He gave college lectures across the country. He took on selective new roles like voicing the diminutive robot Twiki in the sci-fi series Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
Oh, I remember Twiki.
And he was the title character in the Heathcliff cartoon in the 1980s.
He even got to do a massive victory lap on the big screen, too. At the request of Rick Moranis, he voiced the father in the live-action comedy Strange Brew.
Right.
And then, in 1988, he reprised Bugs, Daffy, Porky, Tweety, and Sylvester for the monumental film Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Which is a particularly special moment in cinema history, really. It's one of the very few Disney projects he was deeply involved in.
Because it was a crossover.
Exactly. It allowed him to interact with characters from both major competing studios on the exact same screen, cementing his status as the voice of a generation.
But, the human body has its limits, and the sources reveal a darker side to his physical habits that eventually caught up with him. Blank had angrily begun smoking cigarettes when he was 9 years old.
9 years old, let that sink in.
It's tragic.
And he maintained a habit of smoking at least a pack a day until he finally quit in 1985.
And he only stopped because he was diagnosed with emphysema and later with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. In May 1989, while shooting a commercial, his family noticed this severe, lingering cough and checked him into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center.
And it escalated quickly.
It did. While in the hospital, he suffered a fall, broke his femur, and doctors discovered advanced coronary artery disease. Mel Blanc passed away on July 10, 1989. He was 81 years old.
The void he left in the industry was just immense.
Unquantifiable, really.
The film critic Leonard Maltin captured the absolute magic of Mel Blanc's talent perfectly. He noted how astounding it is to realize that the tiny, high-pitched Tweety bird and the booming, explosive Yosemite Sam are the exact same man.
It defies logic.
He left behind a body of work that is biologically and artistically impossible to replicate.
And fittingly, he ensured he got the final word. In his will, he specified exactly what he wanted, carved into his memorial marker at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It reads, "That's all, folks. The classic Porky Pig sign-off."
A beautifully theatrical exit for a man who spent his entire life behind a microphone, literally breathing life into drawings.
Yeah. So, when you watch a cartoon today and hear Bugs Bunny chewing that carrot, or Daffy Duck sputtering in absolute outrage, you aren't just hearing funny noises.
No, not at all.
You are hearing a man who erased his own name to build something greater. A man whose vocal cords were instruments of staggering athletic power. A man who poured so much of his mental and physical identity into his art that his creations literally spoke for him when he was trapped in the dark.
Beautifully said.
It leaves you with a profound question to mull over. What is the thing in your own life that you have poured so much of yourself into that it could speak for you when your own voice is gone?